New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has apologised for failings in the run-up to the Christchurch mosque attacks, and she says there will be accountability. The government's promising changes in legislation in response to the findings of the Royal Commission into the shootings. The changes include new laws to criminalise planning or preparing a terrorist act and the strengthening of rules around hate speech.
For many years, the Muslim community has raised concerns over the disproportionate scrutiny by security and intelligence agencies. As one member of the community put it to me recently, they could only assume that same level of scrutiny was being applied to those who may have posed a threat to their security. The report confirms that there was, quote, inappropriate concentration of resources. The report specifically notes that before 2018, the concentration of resources was not based on an informed assessment of the threats of terrorism associated with other ideologies. While the Commission made no findings that these issues would have stopped the attack, these were failings nonetheless. And for that, on behalf of the government, I apologise. In addition, the report also discusses the permissive firearms regime that persisted in New Zealand for many decades. It talks about the Thorpe Report in the 1990s and that deficiencies in the firearms licensing system had been recognised in a number of reports and reviews. Despite that, changes were not made until after March 15, and for that we must take responsibility.
Jacinda Ardern speaking earlier on. For more, let's bring in Professor Paul Spoonley of Wellington's Massey University. He is an expert in far-right extremism. Afternoon to you. Jacinda Ardern acknowledging there that they perhaps dropped the ball on this one.
Yes, she's apologised for failings in two areas. One is the firearms legislation, but the other is that the security and intelligence agencies, and this is a phrase from the report, spent inappropriate concentration of resources. The report's very new, so we're just getting used to the terminology, but the inappropriate concentration of resources. And so it was too much focused on Islamic terrorism and overlooked the possibility of white supremacist terrorism.
Why do you think that was? Because of what was happening around the rest of the world at that period?
Yes, indeed. I think it's very much a reflection of the Five Eyes focus, especially after 9/11 and the increasing concern about Islamic terrorism. And so I think it's generally conceded in the report that our major security and intelligence agencies were devoting much of their attention and much of the resource on Islamic terrorism and had really not taken too much notice or appropriate notice of what other possibilities existed.
Is that as well, Paul, do you think, because the Islamic terrorism comes with a big force behind it? It's generally conducted or at least aligned with a particular group, whereas much of the far-right extremist terrorism that we've seen has been individual.
Yes, I think you're right. And I think there's also a local dimension to all of this. So I think I wrote in the hours after the shootings on 15th of March 2019 that we'd lost our innocence. And that innocence related to the fact that we didn't believe as a country that we had groups or individuals who were capable of terrorist acts who were on the far right of the spectrum. So we'd overlooked that. And I think that was a general failing of New Zealanders as well as the agencies. So we'd bought in, if you like, to that international concern with Islamic terrorism. And we should be concerned with terrorism that comes from Islamic groups. But we'd overlooked the possibility that there might be other groups, ideologies and individuals who would carry out something which is really horrific.
The Muslim community, the communities of those two mosques that were so badly targeted have said that they felt for some time before the attacks that there was a lack of trust between the authorities, the police forces in their areas and their community, and that can't have helped. Reports of people outside the mosques being suspicious were not properly investigated, they felt. Is that lack of trust something that you've seen in your research?
Yes, it is. And I was actually at the meeting in 2017 between the Muslim leadership of New Zealand and the senior government agencies and individuals. And the Muslim community were very clear about the threat that they were facing. And it really is reprehensible that those government agencies did not act on that advice at that particular time. So I think the trust between the Muslim community and agencies like the police is one that at the moment needs rebuilding. And I think the challenge for the government and for the Prime Minister here is that of those 44 recommendations, how fast and how quickly and how extensively will the government and the Prime Minister move? And I think if they do move, then that trust might be rebuilt. But that is certainly a key challenge at this particular point in New Zealand.
And on that, as you say, 44 recommendations, there is really no easy and quick fix, is there?
No, there's not. I mean, there's recommendations for new agencies, a new oversight committee, for the changes to legislation concerning firearms, hate speech, social cohesion. It's a very broad-ranging review, and the recommendations reflect that. So there's no easy and quick fix, but it will be the intent and the commitment of the government which will be key at this point.